Welcome to United We Stand America, our interview and discussion portion for our weekly meetings on Monday nights at 5:30 p.m. We are here to bring you the greatest good news in freedom, liberty, and what's going on in your local economy and your local world. So today we're going to be interviewing and talking to and listening to Mark Muskardin, who spoke recently at our United We Stand event in person in Mount Shasta, California, the big white mountain. We hope you come for a visit sometime to one of our events. But we're here live on Zoom for you to check out as well and in the archives. So you'll be watching this video and learning about the current state of cryptocurrency, blockchain, and the idea of decentralized currencies versus or rather than centralized currencies. And the fact is blockchain can be used for both centralized currencies and decentralized currencies. So it's really going to be up to we, the people, to choose how we want to adopt the future of our monetary system. Otherwise, it might be dictated to us, is I think part of what we're going to hear about today. And we might even get into some great details of how exactly you can protect your assets when you get into the cryptocurrency world, just some touching into that, and we'll see how much time we have. But we want to give you some important stuff today. Thank you, Mark, for a great talk at our live event. Thank you for being with us here today and appreciating your presence.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you get us rolling today, Mark, by just letting us know more about what the current state of cryptocurrency is, blockchain, and how it's being used, how it could be used, both for good and for not so good, and what the difference is.
And Michael, before you get started, it would be good if, because you're doing the recording, to change to speaker view so that we can see Mark on big rather than little squares.
Okay, well, Jewel, you've just shown up on speaker view. We are on speaker view. So this is recording in speaker view, and it's going to be shown whoever's speaking will be on the speaker view. So, Mark, we'd love to hear from you. Great talk on Saturday. Let's get into some more depth and detail. The real where are things at with the cryptocurrency world right now, and where do they have the possibilities of going?
All right. So just to let people know, my background, I'm a software developer for over 15 years. So I've worked in tech. And one thing that has become really, really obvious to me over the years is tech is not always good, especially when it centralizes. And that's something that people need to be very careful about, because centralization can breed control. So tech, not always good. However, of course, there's times when it's useful, especially when it can remove a problem. Now, we're kind of sort of delving into money when we talk about cryptocurrencies. I just want to, before we get into like the digital realms and the cryptocurrencies, I just want to say that we really have to make sure we keep physical, non-internet connected cash in our society. Okay. Now, if anything that I say doesn't resonate with you, you connect with your I am presence or whatever, you'll sniff out the baloney. But as somebody who works in tech, I really feel that like 90% of the time, technology is not the right thing to use. So we can't get rid of cash. And the reason we can't get rid of physical cash is because not only can it be tracked, but it can be controlled. And what we've seen in the last 2 years with their push for a vaccine passport system is they would envision us in a world where we start scanning QR codes everywhere we go. And if they could connect that with what they call a central bank digital currency, it could be a recipe for serfdom. So, I work in tech. I still do work in tech because I still, believe that software can be useful. I'm just putting it out there that we have to stick with physical cash for local in-person transactions. Now, when it comes to online transactions, let's say you want to send somebody money over the internet, or you want to purchase a digital good, obviously you can't use physical cash. that's when we get into the cryptocurrency world. Okay, right? Because I can't put cash in an envelope and send it to grandma in another state or another country. That's not going to work out. So that's the first point. Technology can be used for good, but it can also be used for ill. One of the patterns that you can pick up on when you feel that a technology could be used for ill is when it tends to centralize. So a lot of the Silicon Valley tech corps have gotten ginormously wealthy over, the years, is because all of the data flows through their systems, right? So you're on Facebook, you're creating all this value with your memes and your photos and your whatevers. They own that, and you're essentially the product. And that that was fine and dandy for a while because the service is free. But as we can see, because there's a central middleman in a centralized Silicon Valley tech corp, they can censor and they can manipulate information and do all sorts of things with their algorithms. Okay, so the big Silicon Valley tech corps are centralized technology, and things have gotten weird over the years, especially now, because YouTube actually gets its health information from the World Health Organization, and they censor anything that doesn't go against the edicts of the World Health Organization. So Google to me is more of like a technocratic organization. It's part of the technocracy. And one thing that I've woken up to in the last couple of years is that seems like where they want to take us. They want to take us to a technocracy. That's a centrally controlled government that's run by artificial intelligence, and it's run by their algorithms with people like Tony Fauci and Bill Gates punching buttons on the main dashboard. That doesn't forebode well for our freedoms as American. It certainly doesn't forebode well for our constitutional rights. So centralization is something that we all have to be very, very aware of and very conscious of. Now, that being said, there is other kinds of technology that are decentralized and that help us use something called cryptography. I don't know if anybody here has heard about what cryptography is, but cryptography is really kind of a way of using mathematics to encrypt messages so third parties can't see them, but they can also be used creatively in other ways. And sorry about that. One of the ways that a form, can everybody hear me? My computer is acting
You're doing
up.
good, Mark. We can hear you well. And yeah, sounds good. Look good too.
One of the way that cryptography can be used is a specific form of cryptography called public key cryptography. And Bitcoin and Ethereum are built on top of what's called public key cryptography. And that's a technology that I feel could be used for the benefit of the people instead of the centralized powers that be. Okay. Now, what people have to be aware of is if they were to use one of these, I call them open digital systems. That's what Bitcoin is, and that's what Ethereum is. They have to know not like how the technology works, because it's very mind-boggling how this whole thing works, and it goes over people's heads because it's very technical. You don't have to understand how that whole technical system works. I mean, on paper, it would seem like it would never work, but it does in reality. What people have to know are just the rock bottom fundamentals that they need to know in order to use these systems. And the reason we may have to be a little bit more aware of how to use these alternative digital systems is because there's a major thing we have to watch out for. It's a very dystopic technology, highly centralized, called a central bank digital currency. Every single one of us has to know what this is because it's really, really bad. A CBDC, it's called a CBDC. It's a central bank digital currency. And that's a new form of digital currency that would be controlled directly by the central banking cartel. Central banking cartel is like a major source of so many of our woes. It's a huge rabbit hole if you ever get into how they create our money out of thin air and then ask us to pay it back plus interest and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But they want us to go to a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, which means that firstly, all of us would have to get a digital ID, and that would be connected to some sort of central account, for example, at the Federal Reserve, which is something that we've never had before. But more importantly, what's really, really scary about a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, is that it could be programmed in a way that benefits the powers that be. And what do I mean by how could that be programmed? Well, what they could do is with the CBDC, which by the way is not a currency, it's a credit, it's a digital credit, they could program your digital credit to have an expiration date on it. So, they could say, here's your CBDC, it expires in 30 days, you got to spend it within that 30 days. Well, that begs the question, how am I going to have savings if I can only use a CBDC? Well, that's the point. The point is for you not to have savings. They could program the CBDC to only work within a certain radius of your home, which would be fantastic for lockdowns, right? That's going to keep you locked down where you live. And if you exit that radius from your home, your money is going to get turned off. So that's a new mechanism of control we've never seen before. They could program the CBDC to check your vaccination status. And then if you don't get vaccinated by a certain date, well, then your transaction at the grocery store is not going to go through. So how are you going to buy food? So the CBDC is a majorly centrally controlled technology that they want to introduce in conjunction with what I call the QR codification of society, where all of a sudden we're going from walking into stores and restaurants, gyms, public spaces, not even thinking twice about it, to all of a sudden you need to scan a QR code. Well, they want to connect that with the money, and we can't have it. Now, here's the thing. Most people know, they're learning that CBDC is not going to work out for us. It would decimate our freedoms. So they know we're not going to want it. But what we see time and time again is that the people we're dealing with are professional racketeers. They run rackets. And the way they do that is they introduce some sort of emergency, some sort of problem to get the people to beg them for some new change that we would never have agreed to in a million years. So I don't know what they're cooking up. I don't know what they could devise. They want to put us, it seems to me that they want to put us to a CBDC. It would be great for them. We can't do it. So we need to train ourselves with the alternatives, right? So this is where the open digital systems, the alternatives come in, like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, Bitcoin is just a decentralized currency, okay? And it's built on a system called public key cryptography, and it just uses a blockchain, which is just like a data structure to register transactions, okay? So I pay you, Michael, that's actually a transaction that gets registered on the blockchain, which is like a decentralized ledger that nobody controls. And that's how the system works. It's built on a decentralized blockchain. The fascinating thing about Bitcoin is that nobody controls it. The way that it's controlled, the way that it's managed, is it's managed through a very clever combination of algorithms. They're called consensus algorithms. Bitcoin uses something called proof of work, and incentives. Everybody is decentralized. Everybody's incentivized in a decentralized way to keep the system running, and that's pretty cool. So there's no Silicon Valley tech corp in the middle of Bitcoin. There's no government in the Bitcoin. There's no Wall Street firm in the middle of Bitcoin. So
question for you, Mark. This question is coming from some people that are at the event. Their concern is that because everything in Bitcoin is so shared across all the databases, that they would have no real privacy in their transactions, and they would not really have true anonymity in any of these blockchain technologies. Is that true, or is it anonymity built into the system?
No, anonymity is not built into the system. What you do have to be aware though is that you could create as many accounts as you want on Bitcoin, because all you have to do is generate a wallet, which is a combination of a public and a private key, which I was going to get into in just a moment. But all the transactions are public because they're registered on the blockchain that everybody can see. Now, there are services that can obfuscate your transactions over Bitcoin, but that's additional. But all the transactions that go through Bitcoin are open, but they're not associated with names or anything or social security numbers. The only way that they can track your transactions on Bitcoin is if you have purchased Bitcoin via a centralized exchange like Coinbase. So Coinbase is a centralized exchange. That's a middleman right in the middle. They will take your dollars in exchange for Bitcoin, but they have to send your Bitcoin to your Bitcoin's wallet address. So they're going to have that entered in the database somewhere, right? And they have to do that because of anti-money laundering laws and know your customer, KYC laws, all that stuff. That being said, just as a side note, I mean, people can get access to Bitcoin without going through Coinbase. I know of people who drive down to Reading to go to the Bitcoin meetups. That's up to you. None of my business. I'm just telling you, that's something to be done. That's something that some people may do. But yeah, your wallet addresses are registered on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's just not associated with you and your name. It's just a hexadecimal address. It's a series of characters. But the thing is we use dollars in our system, right? Because people accept dollars mainly to pay the rent. So, if you want to use Bitcoin to live your life and buy groceries, you're going to have to convert it to dollars. And that's where it gets connected to your ID as a person in our society. So that's the truth. Okay. Now, if we were all trading, if we were all accepting Bitcoin without, it's a decentralized system. If we didn't have to convert the Bitcoin to dollars, well, then that's where you could stay more anonymous, because like I said, you don't have to have just one ID on Bitcoin. You can generate 1 billion different wallet accounts on Bitcoin if you wanted to. And, as long as I get your Bitcoin in exchange for my service, it's between you and me. And that's because Bitcoin is peer-to-peer. So when I send you money on Bitcoin, I'm sending it to you directly. It's not going through a central database. It's a peer-to-peer decentralized technology. And another really cool thing about it is it's programmed to be deflationary. Okay, so there's a maximum amount of Bitcoins that will ever be minted in the entire history of Bitcoin. It's
What's that? Is that 11 million? Is that right?
It's 21 million.
Oh, 21 million. Okay, thank you.
21 million, I believe, yes. And when we think in terms of value, right, an asset has to be scarce, right? Gold is scarce because it's difficult to mine and so forth and so on. So built-in scarcity gives an asset value, okay? So that's a nice thing about Bitcoin. Bitcoin on the downside consumes a huge amount of electricity. Okay, the whole Bitcoin network consumes as much energy as the entire country of Ireland. So we have to be aware of that. It's very energy intensive, but we can't ever, it can't be touched. You know what I'm saying? So one thing that we have to be careful of with the digital technologies is even the things that are decentralized right now, I don't know what could happen in the future. I mean, if the future generations decide to change things, they could manipulate things and centralize the technology that was always meant to be decentralized. That's why we always have to keep physical cash in the system and have like a balance between money that's completely non-technical and one that may be digital. But there's a push now from some people who are complaining that Bitcoin is too energy intensive and it's contributing to climate change. And now we have to change the algorithm of Bitcoin to a different one. It's called proof of stake, which is a lot less energy intensive. Well, fortunately enough, the Bitcoin people are so paranoid about centralization that they're not going to do it, and we can't do it. Bitcoin can't be touched.
Okay, so to be clear on that point, Mark, because it's not truly anonymous in a regular person's wallet. They're going to be transacting with it. It's not really going to be that anonymous at the end of the day, apparently. So my question, and the question that coming from another person is, if say this centralized currency is very easy to control, the individual say, hey, let's turn it off if that person doesn't agree with the, whoever controls the currency. So how different is that than if there's that kind of power control that certain governmental authorities have? How difficult would it be for them to seize the assets? I mean, is it more difficult to seize the assets from the Bitcoin or not?
They can't seize your Bitcoin because Bitcoin is built on public key cryptography, which means that for every wallet that you generate, it's a combination of two cryptographic keys, a public and a private key. You, as the individual, have to keep your private key safe and hidden from everybody and backed up appropriately so you don't lose it. But because you have, and only you have, access to your private key, nobody can seize your assets, your Bitcoin. They can't do it. It's not technically feasible. The only problem here is that, with additional sovereignty that we may have for ourselves if we use some of these decentralized cryptocurrencies, what comes with that is responsibility, because you have to know what you're doing, right? You have to back up your private key. You need to get one of these like Trezor or Ledger devices, and you need to make sure that you back up your private key with something called a 24-word seed phrase, which can never ever be digitally recorded. It's just a series of 24 words that you write on a piece of paper, no technology involved at all, that you lock into a fireproof safety deposit box, one copy there, and then another copy put into a safety deposit box at your local bank, or give it to a family member that you really trust. You have to be sure that you back up your private key, because if you do lose your private key for any account, any wallet that you have, well, you've lost your money. Okay, but the benefit is we can, if we were all using something like Bitcoin, we wouldn't have a situation like Canada where they evoked the Emergency Powers Act to freeze protesters' accounts. It's not possible when we use these public key cryptographic systems. Okay, so there's a balance here. Now, so that's just a little bit about Bitcoin. Another, what I call
a question, Mark, sorry to interrupt. I had a friend, Patriot Local, she said, are you working on this, is it the Stellar or the Interstellar? I might be thinking of maybe the Stellar networks, which is the Patriot networks, or are you working on other platforms? She was just wondering.
I teach developers how to build for Ethereum, it's called. And Ethereum is very prominent at the moment because it's allowing us to create a new kind of finance that's called decentralized finance, DeFi, which some people like to refer to as open finance or open banking. And that's what I was going to kind of get into next. So no, I don't work with Stellar. I work with something called Ethereum. And we have to educate ourselves a little bit about that, because that has some good stuff. It has some warts that we have to be very conscious of as well. Okay.
Well, that's going to entail some further discussion. Obviously, this is a very in-depth subject, and the Ethereum platform, DeFi, I think would be very interesting to people, how to get away from the traditional banking system, also how to become a banker, right? And that is what I believe DeFi allows someone that can leverage their Ethereum to actually enter the world of finance. And, I don't know what the regulations are and that kind of thing, but we also know the world is changing fast. So this seems like a very interesting possibility, and I'm very interested to discuss more with you in the future of this. Rhonda, did you have a question? And then Michael. We can't hear you yet, Rhonda, but I think you're unmuted. So for some reason, we can't hear you though. So let's get back to you. We'll go to Michael. Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, Mark, very good. Thank you very much. I wanted to know who controls the algorithm. Who's behind? I know there was a couple of guys or somebody, they got together and they created the whole concept of Bitcoin with the decentralized types of transactions. That has been hacked before. I think the $30 million was, or $30 million was stolen out of the Bitcoin system. There was some connection with Japan back maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And they had to do something to make it safer so it couldn't be hacked.
Okay.
Aware of any of that?
Yeah. So we need to clear some things up. Okay. So some people say that Bitcoin is corrupt, right? So some of my, friends who are, more wary of technology, they go around saying that Bitcoin is corrupt, but the Bitcoin protocol is not corrupt. And the Bitcoin protocol itself has never been hacked. Now that's the Bitcoin protocol. Now on the periphery of the protocol are exchanges, right? Namely, Bitcoin has had centralized exchanges on the periphery. And yeah, there was a famous one called Mt. Gox, right? That one lost a huge amount, many millions of dollars. That's a whole other thing. That was, if you put your money in a centralized exchange, right? And the people who own or control this exchange either have a legal problem or they decide to run away with your money. That can happen, but that's a centralized technology. And just segue just briefly onto Ethereum, the applications that we build for Ethereum now for DeFi are non-custodial, which means that when you interface with a real application on Ethereum, which is backed by a technology called a smart contract, there's no centralized middleman. Your assets are non-custodial, which means the middleman doesn't own your assets, you do, because that's how this whole thing is supposed to work. So it is incorrect to say Bitcoin is corrupt or it has been hacked. No, Bitcoin is an open protocol. We don't know who wrote the code. They say it's this entity called Satoshi Nakamoto. The ID of that person is not known. People say it was a group of cypherpunks in San Francisco. Who knows? All we know is the code. The code works. This thing has been secure for many years. And it's being attacked left and right because there's a huge amount of Bitcoin. But to say Bitcoin is corrupt is incorrect. It has never been hacked. The software services on the periphery of the Bitcoin protocol that are run centrally by people, yeah, we have instances of that being hacked. So that would be true.
So,
Thank you.
So is that clear? Like the Bitcoin protocol itself runs on.
That part is clear, because those are organizations on the periphery,
right,
that are just using Bitcoin for whatever their structure is. But the structure of the whole Bitcoin system is man-created, and therefore it has to be able to be hacked. because you can't create something bigger than the creator of it. And therefore, it doesn't make sense to me that it is incorruptible by, let's say, whoever started Bitcoin, they're gonna die, and they have to hand off the secrets to somebody. It's just like, creating a computer, and the computer is going to be, the program is going to be able to take care of you, and nobody can hack it. Well, somebody created that. They created the software for it. And so therefore, it is something that can be accessed and can be manipulated. I can't conceive how something can be created that is bigger than the creator.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, so whether or not Bitcoin can potentially be hacked in the future, frankly, I don't think anyone can 100% guarantee that's not a possibility. But as of right now, it hasn't been hacked, and people have been trying for many years. So we don't know where the source code came from, Michael. We don't know what inspired the source code either. We don't know, because it is a game changer. And it has changed the way we look at currency and the possibility of the future currency. And it appears to be what Mark's talking about is a centralized currency would be possibly trying to use this technology against the freedom of humanity, but that this technology may be able to be used for the freeing of humanity. And at this time, there's certainly some unique and interesting things taking place. So I appreciate that perspective. And yeah, I mean, let's move on knowing that, hey, there's no guarantees in the world other than the sun will come up tomorrow morning, but we still have to deal with what's in front of us. And right now, this seems like a pretty solid piece of programming. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, we see the code. We can read the code. Nobody controls the code. Nobody can change the code. Again, there are people who want to chip away at, the software that's responsible for mining the code because they feel that it's consuming too much energy. So there's always people who may want to centralize things in the future. So I mean, I agree with Michael, what Michael is saying to a degree. We don't know what could happen in the future. We have to be very careful. I would be I would never want to go to an all digital monetary system ever. That's why some people just like silver. That's not connected to the internet. Gold, those kinds of assets that have provided lots, have shown to have value over thousands of years. But as of right now, Bitcoin has not been hacked. We see the code, it's transparent, and the protocol hasn't changed since it was launched as well.
Thank you.
So it's
okay,
very
we have a couple more questions, and appreciate that. Also, you did show some technology. You showed a dongle, a kind of a attachment that saves the actual code. So people, if they lose their written code, they have that to back it up. And that's a secure way to, on a hardware piece, to store the numbers of, could be a very vast amount of somebody's savings, possibly, because a lot of people have some big numbers in crypto coin. So that's one way to keep it secure. Do you want to just briefly, Mark, just mention those two items that you mentioned?
Right. So again, this is a technical topic, right? You don't have to understand how this works, at a fine detail. All you have to understand is that there's something called a wallet, right? And a wallet is a combination of two magical keys. Your public key, which is something that's visible, given out freely. And then there's something called a private key, which is married to your public key. And the private key must always be kept private. It has to be kept hidden. And you have to back up your private key correctly by writing on a piece of paper what's called a 24-word seed phrase. It's a collection of just 24 random words that you could use to recreate your wallet, including its private piece of paper can't ever be digitized. You cannot write the 24-word seed phrase on a digital medium. You just can't, you don't do that. And it has to be backed up as well. Because if you lose the 24-word seed phrase, and you key, you lose your money. You lose to currency. Okay, so that's all you kind of have to, like, that's the rock bottom piece of a bit of fundamental knowledge that people have to know. It's a wallet, public key, private key, 24-word seed phrase. You got to back it up. Don't lose that. And that's like, that's just like the main foundation of what you need to know. If you want to go down the rabbit hole and start learning about consensus algorithms and how they work and how Bitcoin incentivizes everybody to keep the network decentralized and so forth and so on, sure, no problem. You know, take your time going down that rabbit hole and figuring out this fascinating technology, because it's fascinating how this whole thing just works. But you don't have to do that. That's the point. Just know what a wallet is.
The name of those two hardware pieces that also can store the seed phrase are what?
No, so, okay. So this is a hardware wallet, also referred to as a cold storage wallet. This stores a private key because you want to be able to use your private key when you access decentralized services through your web browser, right? To authenticate yourself and to be able to move your cryptocurrencies, your digital assets around, you need your private key. That's the one thing that gives you superpowers over your unique digital assets and cryptocurrencies. That private key is stored on this cold storage device. That's what's stored here. And then, you know, if you want to use a DeFi protocol, a decentralized finance protocol, to do some cool open banking stuff, you plug this into your computer, your laptop, your desktop, whatever, and you need to have it's called a middleman wallet called MetaMask in order to be able to connect to some of these DeFi protocols on Ethereum. I don't want to feed too much people too much information yet. Your private key gets stored on a cold storage wallet. Your 24-word seed phrase, a series of 24 words documented on a piece of paper only, backs this up. And you store this in a safety deposit box at your local community bank or with your family member, whatever. This can't be revealed. And this is how you back this up. Okay? Private key goes on here. That's your superpower. If anybody were to see your private key, or if you gave it, if you had it like hanging around on your laptop or something, and some hacker stole the private key, your money's gone, because they have superpower over your wallet accounts and any kind of money in the ledger that says how much money you have. Okay, so that's what we have to know here, and that's what we have to train people to be aware of.
Okay, and quickly, what protects the hardware from if that was stolen to being misused by somebody?
What protects the hardware from being stolen? What do you mean exactly?
What if the hardware was, if that piece you're holding right there was taken by somebody else, what protects your investment from them using that hardware to access it?
Well, if you didn't provide a passphrase on this thing, they have your private key, so they can plug it in and they can do whatever they want. So your money's gone.
Oh, okay. So basically it's a password protected environment. That's pretty much it for that hardware then.
For this, exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't want anybody getting this.
And the two types of hardware you mentioned are what again? The two kinds of hardware?
Well, there's only one piece of hardware here. It's called
a company, and the other one's Ledger, right? So there's Ledger.
Right. One is Trezor. This is a Trezor, And then there's another one called Ledger. Those are the two cold storage hardware wallets that people
Treasure
use.
and Ledger. Okay, good to know. Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, well, moving on, we have a couple more questions for you. There's tons of details here. This is an interesting discussion. I think people can learn more about this stuff. At the very least, it's fascinating. And reality is a lot of people I know have their own crypto wallets at this point. Coinbase makes it easy, but perhaps not the best way to do it. There's other ways as well. So let's ask Ron. Rhonda has a question. They had a severe drought this summer. In order to keep the grid up due to overwork, Bitcoin mining was temporarily stopped in Texas. Is that a danger in using Bitcoin?
Well, if the grid goes down, then everything goes, everything goes down. It's not just Bitcoin that goes down. You're not going to be able to get cash out of an ATM machine. Like, the grid goes down. So yeah, I would say the grid going down is a concern. And that's why for local in-person transactions, we should never ever go digital. We should have a paper currency, or even better yet, a currency that actually has intrinsic value in it, like silver and gold. So I think that's a very valid point. What happens if the internet goes down? Well, we can't use anything on the internet, and we don't want to be dependent on the internet as well. Again, that's why there has to be a balance here. And this is like, I don't want to go too deep into like the digital realms. Local in-person transactions, I think, should just always be some sort of local currency, non-digital. That's it. So that's a good question. What happens if the internet goes down? Well, we're in big trouble for online stuff. But if we live in communities that either have local currencies, or if we're able to keep our national government having, giving us a local a cash as currency, then we don't have to be that afraid if the grid goes down.
Okay. Yeah, and if Bitcoin mining was part of that question, I don't believe if people stop Bitcoin mining, it doesn't actually affect whether people can transact in Bitcoin. So those are a little different. Is that true?
So the question is if Bitcoin mining stops, do people?
Yeah, if it stopped locally in Texas, does that affect someone else's ability in Texas to use Bitcoin in any way?
No, because there are miners all across the world. It's not just, miners don't just exist in Texas. No, it wouldn't. This is decentralized technology. So if miners in Texas go down, some other miner somewhere across the world is going to be processing Bitcoin transactions. This is decentralized technology. I mean, if the grid goes down in Texas, then you can't get on the internet, you won't be able to access Bitcoin because you need to know. But there will be some other miner across the world where electricity is not down that will process transactions. So it's not dependent on electricity running in or being available in a specific area in terms of processing transactions. But you do have to get on the internet though to be able to send money.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. If the grid goes down, how are people going to transact if they're all digital, right? It's not going to work. So, Jewel, would you like to offer a question? I think you had your hand up, and then we'll have two more questions, real brief ones, and then we'll ask you to complete this.
Yeah, I was just wanting to speak up for Rhonda, but I thought of, just now, I mean, at the time we're at the precipice here. It seems that all the patriots are saying the fiat, we're printing money right now, and just printing money from the central bank system, which is linked up to the World Economic Forum and the vaccination consciousness and all of the head honchos. So is this a good time to get in? Because I know Bitcoin was low and then it went up, and just for us, I mean, for the patriots who are trying to maybe go out and get silver and maybe not a lot of extra cash, but is this a good time to even get in with a little bit of money right now, in your opinion?
You mean, is it a good idea to buy Bitcoin from like an investment perspective? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, to get some Bitcoin and to get some Ethereum right now.
Okay, I don't give investment advice. Okay, so that's up to you to decide. All I could say is that I like the Bitcoin technology. It has proven itself to be secure and decentralized as of now. But the whole point of cryptocurrency is how we use it. I don't look at Bitcoin or Ethereum as an investment personally. It's how we use it. It's a peer-to-peer technology. So I think looking at it as an investment would, in my opinion here, not be a good idea. It's how we use it. To be fair, also, I mean, I have Ether, I have Ethereum, and from a financial perspective, it has worked out for me. But I got in like early. But I use it. You know what I'm saying? I use Ether because I use DeFi because I'm trying to unplug from the central banking matrix. I don't want to give them my money anymore. I don't want to give the Rockefellers one more red cent after they've been sucking us dry and want to push us into this global technocracy. I'm not going to put my money into their system. So, but I have to build my business, and I have to pay my rent, and I have to do all this stuff. So, because I know how to use DeFi on Ethereum, the Ether cryptocurrency, which is like digital oil for Ethereum, has proved to be very valuable for me. And I wanted to share a little bit about how to work on DeFi, but it's another topic that maybe we can get into another time. But
Yeah,
again,
that sounds great. That'll be very interesting. Thanks for that comment. Thanks, Joel. Yeah, very fascinating too. That it's not just an investment tool. It's really actually an opening to new ways of doing business in general, including DeFi. And DeFi opens a lot of doors, and there's a lot of different ways that Ethereum is being developed to actually create a new kind of economy or a new kind of way of moving, producing products and moving goods. So, Michael,
I appreciated that answer because, you know, up until now, it just seems like, oh, get some, you know, so that it'll double. But I actually like, I feel like we're building the new kingdom. We're not waiting for some guy to fix it in a couple of years, which, you know, our system might not exist actually by then if we're waiting for that. In my personal opinion, but right now, like as you're using it, I know some people were using it like around town, even in this little town. Even Thrive was taking crypto. So I really appreciate like getting away from PayPal and Venmo and, you know, all those places that are threatening us right now. I like your answer that like it's helpful for people watching this. Put it into currency right now, like start using it as currency. I know you're not giving advice, and let's get it circulating so that we're not all talking about these great ideas and yet we're still in the slave matrix, you know,
right.
paying to these enslavers.
But for in-person, I'm not a fan of like in-person Bitcoin transactions because I could just give somebody cash or a local currency. You know what I'm saying? Because then if we get into everything being digital, firstly, you're going to have to be married to a cell phone, right? It's going to be like your new microchip, if you will. And then there's all, you know, there's electromagnetic frequency radiation going around all over the place. You know, I'm opening my voice and putting my thing out there for in-person transactions. It just doesn't have to be digital. It just doesn't. It's for online transactions where the decentralized cryptocurrencies come into play. I just want to just put my input there. Okay.
thank you. All right, excellent question. Thank you, Joel, and thank you, Mark. Michael, would you like to give our final question for the day?
Well, I just wanted to make a couple of observations. If you go to a store, you have a certain amount of money in your pocket. You thought it was enough, but you see some items, some extra items you want to buy while you're at the store. It's awfully handy to pull out your debit card and go ahead and make the purchase that way. The other is that the fascinating thing about the digital world is that theoretically, there only needs to be one Bitcoin in existence. The only problem with that is that you'd have to have so many zeros after the decimal point to say, if you want to make a transaction, you'd have 300 zeros and then a 1672 or something like that, that you either have bought that much of a Bitcoin or you're doing a transaction with that much of that one Bitcoin. So it's fascinating that way. I've been doing some work for a guy locally who is building a sizable building, and the sole purpose of that is to generate Bitcoin. So we've had to bring in a lot of electrical power in there, and he's up and running.
Interesting.
He's generating Bitcoin. But as I understand it, Mark, the closer you get to that limit of its 21 million Bitcoin, the more energy it takes to create extra Bitcoin.
Correct.
Like squeezing down, it just keeps squeezing down to that final end. And the only reason at that point that anybody would generate it is that then Bitcoin has become so valuable that it's still worth the energy to create that last Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
That would be like, that's not a good scenario for my perspective.
That's the
I would
reality of it.
live in a world. I wouldn't want to get to a situation where like a Bitcoin is so valuable that people would be willing to consume so much energy to get it. Let's be honest and let's state where the real value is here. Okay. The value is for you as an individual, value is in terms of like your time and your freedom, right? That's your value. And that's what money is used to encapsulate. So you can deploy it when you want. But like as a community, like the real value to me is in the land, right? It's in the agriculture. It's in the, it's in too far from like realizing where our true wealth is. Okay, it's our food, it's our land, it's the quality of our environment, and to me, like getting into a situation where like a Bitcoin would be so valuable that we would consume like a ton of energy, I don't want to go down that route personally. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like these are just digital, virtual things. You know what I'm saying? They exist in the virtual sphere. They don't exist in reality.
But
And
that
you know
is,
the
that's
reason I'm seeing
mathematical
this.
concept, though. That is the
But-
mathematical concept of Bitcoin, and the finite number of Bitcoin that can be produced.
Right. No, that's true. It has built-in scarcity. But one thing that we have seen recently is that, you know, people put so much like focus, people who are into Bitcoin can put so much focus into the Bitcoin and the value of the Bitcoin, but then they're forgetting like where the real wealth is, right? It's with us. It's with our health. It's just, that's what we need to focus on. You know what I'm saying? And then I think it would be really sad if people would get so obsessed with their Bitcoin holdings and their assets because it just keeps on like growing in value over time. And then you forget to like look out the window and see, you know, trees being torn down or our land not being able to grow and be fertile. So we have to remember where our true wealth and our true value is. That's my point. You can take it as you wish.
excellent, Mark. Yeah, that's a good finisher right there. I did want to briefly mention though, however, that I met a company actually, and it was a few years ago. They were working on creating a debit card kind of thing that could be vended at any gas station, and people could buy sort of debit cards that would also transact cryptocurrencies and make it a lot easier for the average person just to go ahead and buy stuff with it at the store. Now that hasn't come out. Clearly there is probably going to be a lot of control around the monetary supply. And there are certainly those who wouldn't want to see that kind of freedom coming through. Not that that is the future. We don't know what the future is. I like your idea, Mark, that it's really about we, the people, the energy we produce. Also, for me, it's got to be sound money. And Ron Paul's a good guy to talk to you about that. But sound money isn't what this really is necessarily. We have scarcity, but we still don't have intrinsic value other than the value that we give it. So that in itself is interesting. And if we can move to actually a blockchain technology that frees humanity, that is based on intrinsic value rather than just the value we choose to give it, I think we'll have a winning formula. That's my perspective on the far future. Now, in the immediate term, there's some very important investment opportunities for people, as well as a way to stay a little free if the other systems get weird. So definitely important information for some people to consider. And at the same time, I recommend personally everyone follows their intuition in their heart. Panic, fear, racing into the investment, trying to win at the big bet. None of that is really going to bring the kind of intrinsic value we need to really value ourselves, value each other, value our community, and build a better America. So all important information here. I appreciated our communication today. I don't see your video is not really working on my side of things right now, Mark. I'm not sure why that is, but you could try loading one more time. Thank you for this great discussion today, everybody. Really nice to have all your questions and all of our discussion. Mark, once again, thank you. You have a lot of expertise. There's more to come, I think, in that with our United We Stand America movement and some of the stuff you're sharing and offering to us. DeFi is interesting as well. So we're going to stop the recording in a moment, and then we're going to do some prayers and song to finish up. That's how we finish our meetings. We are here to pray for America's freedom, her liberty, and all of her people, and those who choose to be an American because they love freedom. So thank you once again, Mark.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Sorry. I'll have to log out if you want to still see my video. But thank you for letting me speak. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we had a good time. Okay, we're going to stop the recording now. Thank you, everybody.